Good morning, good listeners, and welcome back to the Shakespeare podcast. So, today's episode is about adapting Love's Labour's Lost. This play is often treated like a problem child in the Shakespeare canon. It's a comedy with no marriages, a romance that refuses to resolve, and a play so obsessed with language that the words themselves become the main event. For readers, it can feel dazzling. For performers and adapters, it can feel almost willfully uncooperative. That awkwardness has consequences. Love's Labour's Lost is performed far less frequently than Shakespeare's more familiar comedies, and it's even rarer to see it adapted into new forms. Its dense wordplay, topical jokes, and unresolved ending make it a risky choice for theatres and an intimidating one for adapters. Compared to the endless afterlives of Much Ado, Twelfth Night, or A Midsummer Night's Dream, this play often feels like it's been quietly left on the shelf, which makes it a fascinating test case for Shakesfic. What does it mean to adapt a play that Shakespeare fandom itself seems hesitant to touch? In today's episode, I'm joined by Elizabeth Wright, whose PhD research explores adapting Love's Labour's Lost into a novel. We talk about why this play has such a reputation for being unadaptable, where adapters feel the strongest urge to intervene, and whether refusing to resolve the story might be the boldest and most faithful choice of all. So, good morning, Elizabeth. Today we're going to have a discussion with Elizabeth Wright from the University of Hull. I met Elizabeth at a BSA conference, I think a couple of years ago, and I was fascinated by the poster of her creative project, which is a novelized adaptation of Love's Labour's Lost. Elizabeth's research is on Shakespeare and fan fiction. And it's interesting nowadays, right now, there's a lot of fan fiction based on Shakespeare. So we're going to have hopefully quite a stimulating discussion on that topic. So to begin with, Elizabeth, why Shakespeare fan fiction?
Well, to answer that with a question, why not really? I mean, it's as you said, there's a lot of it about at the moment, but not particularly of the play that I'm looking at, which obviously is personally one of my favourite Shakespeare plays. But it's one of the plays that doesn't get done much. It doesn't even get performed that much. So I wanted to bring attention to that. But why Shakespeare in general, I suppose, is because the themes he covers in his plays are still relevant, even though we're more than 400 years after his death. there's a universality and an adaptability there that means you can still do things with his plays.
Mm. So, do you feel that Shakespeare has, through the ages, been a tool for a lot of people to express current issues or personal issues, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
Hmm. So fan fiction, what is the difference? What is the difference between a piece of work that is inspired by Shakespeare or what is an adaptation of Shakespeare compared to something that you'd call fan fiction?
Yes. So this is something I actually address in my thesis, the difference between adaptation and fan fiction. So for me, fan fiction is something that is on purpose using the plot, character, or setting of an original piece of work. I mean, we could go even more meta and talk about how Shakespeare used other sources for his works, but actually, Love's Labour's Lost, interestingly, is one of the most original of Shakespeare's works.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a direct plot source for it like there is for others. But yes, the difference between adaptation and fan fiction. An adaptation is, for me, using the actual play itself as a performance, but perhaps with modern dress or a different setting on the stage. Whereas fan fiction, I'm taking the characters and I'm taking the plot and I'm making it into something else, particularly because I'm going from a play to a novel
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going from a king and lords to a boy band, and I'm going from when it was set to modern day.
Mm. Okay, so let's get into that in more detail. Could you, for people who might not be familiar with the play, give us a brief synopsis?
Okay, so Love's Labour's Lost. It opens with a king and his 3 attendant lords, and they are at the court. And what they do is make a vow that for 3 years they're going to study, they're going to fast, they're going to sleep less, and they're not going to see any women in that time. And once they've all signed their names on that vow and it's all set in stone, done and dusted, and there's penalties, ridiculous things like such shame as the rest of the court can devise, and on penalty of losing a tongue or whatever else it is that they've come up with because they're ridiculous. Then one of the lords reminds the king, oh, wait, had you forgotten that the Princess of France and her attendant ladies are coming to visit to discuss the surrender of Aquitaine, which is a bit of land. And the king was like, oh no, I had forgot that the Princess of France and her attendant ladies were coming. We'll have to put them in a tent in the field, basically, because they can't come into the court. But they go out to greet the ladies. And of course, after making this vow that they're going to study and fast and not see any women and not fall in love, absolutely not, they immediately fall in love with the first 4 women that they see after making the vow.
Of course.
And what follows is each of the lords sort of struggling with that individually until it all comes to quite an amusing scene where each lord is revealing that he's in love one by one, being overheard by all the others. And then they decide, okay, well, let's just try and woo them then. So they do that, and that's also hilarious. They give them gifts and they come dressed up and put on a little skit for them. The ladies, they just mock them this entire time, which is it's quite girl power, really. I love that about Love's Labour's Lost, because, for example, when the lords give them the gifts, the ladies put on masks and each swap their gifts, so that then when the lords come to visit them, they're each wooing the wrong lady because they're just looking for the gift that they've given, instead of actually looking for, the appearance of the but, that's Shakespeare. It wouldn't be Shakespeare without a bit of mistaken identity and misunderstanding, would it?
Yeah.
But the play is called Love's Labour's Lost because the labour of love at the end of the play is lost, and the couples do not end up together in Love's Labour's Lost because at the end of the play, we get this beautiful scene where the sort of staff of the King's Court basically are putting on a play for the lords and ladies, and then one of the princess's men arrives and says, "My lady, I'm so sorry, your father's died."
Oh, gosh.
So she becomes the queen then and has to go back to France. And she basically says, because the king is like, "Oh, but I thought we were going to get together, you know?" And the princess is like, "Okay, well, we thought you were just, you know, having some fun to pass the time. We didn't take this seriously. If you are serious about it, come to me in a year's time when I've like finished mourning for my dad and I've got used to being queen and stuff."
Mm.
And so then the other lords say to the other ladies, "Okay, well, what about us? Are we going to get together?" And the other ladies say, "Do you know what? Also, if you're serious, you come back in a year's time as well." So that's how it ends, basically. And we can only then assume that in Love's Labour's one, which is lost, that they do come back in a year's time and maybe get together, but we don't know.
So do you think that this was a setup for the next part of the play?
I would like to think so. Shakespeare was a very clever man and would not do what was expected of him most of the time. So who knows what happens in Love's Labour's one? We can only guess.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting ending for what is usually seen as a comedy. Do you think that this peculiar ending is why it's not adapted as much, or there aren't more productions of it?
Do you know, it could be because the RSC did a production of it recently with Luke Thompson from Bridgerton in it.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I wanted to go and see it because of my thesis and because I'm studying it. But I didn't want to go on my own. So I took one of my friends who had never seen Love's Labour's Lost before. And at the end, she was like, "What was that? Where's the rest of it? Like, what? That can't be how it ends." And she was so shocked that they don't get together at the end.
Yeah.
And it is a tricky one because it sort of defies the genre expectations, because comedies end in marriage, tragedies end in death, typically for Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And Love's Labour's Lost, well, it ends with the death of the King of France, I suppose. So if we're talking basic genre terms, we could call it a tragedy. And what did one of the characters, I think it's Barone, says at the end, "These ladies' courtesy might well have made our sport a comedy."
Mm.
So, like, it's acknowledged within the play that it's not ending how we might expect.
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder what the thinking was there. So, Um, what were some of the creative decisions that you had to make in order to perhaps update the play, or the genre expectations that you spoke about? Do you keep the ending or do you change it?
I do keep the ending, actually. I try within romance novels at the moment, there's a difference between happily ever after and happily for now.
Mm,
So I'm trying to turn it into a happily for now ending with the hint that I'm going to go on to a sequel.
mm,
So that was one of my decisions, was to keep the same ending, because I think Love's Labour's Lost is not Love's Labour's Lost without that ending.
mm.
If it's all resolved and ends happily, then you're fundamentally changing the key thing about that play.
Yeah.
And I wanted to create a fan fiction that was faithful to the original while still being enjoyable for a modern audience and for people who don't know anything about Love's Labour's Lost. I suppose the main creative decisions I've made were, what are the key plot points of what are the key plot points of Love's Labour's Lost, and how can I make them work for me? So I think the first major change is going from a king and lords to a boy band, because in my novel they're a boy band.
Yeah.
I just thought perhaps that a king and lords was not very relatable, I suppose, for a modern audience. Not that many people can relate to the experience of being in a boy band, but I suppose the escapism of that is what I was going for. What I also tried to do, because in Love's Labour's Lost, there's a lot of coincidence that brings them all together. Because it's like, oh, we've made this vow, but oh, had you forgot that the princess was coming? So I've tried to make that less coincidental. I've actually made one of the ladies the sister of one of the boy band members, because then the connection is less tenuous.
Yeah.
But I've kept most of the key bits of Love's Labour's Lost. Particularly the scene where each lord is revealing that he's in love one by one. I've got each boy band member has his own little introspective chapter, but is still being overheard by one or more of the others, because that was my favourite scene in the play. When I saw it originally, the RSC did a production of it, I think in 2015, something like that. And that was the one that inspired me to do this whole thing, basically. I've been germinating this idea for, wow, I suppose about 10 years now then.
Yeah, long time. So about the motivation then so the lords make a pledge not to see any women and focus on their studies. How does that translate to a boy band who decide, because one would expect being part of a boy band would inevitably attract female attention.
So they're in a bit of trouble, the boy band. They had a bit of a wild party and trashed a hotel, and their managers sent them on this songwriting retreat and basically been like, you need to produce another album, and then you're going on tour, and that is all you're doing. So while they're there, they decide to be like, okay, well then let's take this seriously. Otherwise, we're just going to end up being like cruise ship entertainment, I think one of them says. So they make another contract between themselves that's basically like, okay, we're going to focus on the music. We're going to write. We're not going to have any romantic distractions at all. We're here. Let's just get the job done.
Yeah.
And anyone who breaks it is out of the band.
That's a strong, I think, updating of that trope. So what about the women? Do you, so in the play, of course, the women in the end kind of suggest that they weren't taking the whole courtship seriously. So in your adaptation, do you do something similar?
Yes, something similar. It's kind of a different. It's different for each couple. In mine, because we've got one couple where the girl says, well, I never thought you were serious about it. I just thought, we were just flirting, just for fun. I've got one that basically is like, I'm not going to get with you until after you've been on tour, because I know that what goes on tour stays on tour, and I don't want any part of that. One of the girls is actually the stylist of the band, so her reason is basically, well, we can't get together because I work for you, and that's weird.
Seems very sensible, yeah.
So, it's different motivations for each couple, but it's reason enough that they wouldn't get together immediately. It's like, it needs to be believable.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's what I tried.
It seems very relatable. I think it's also quite plausible because I've personally always found, so for me personally, it's the disappointing ending, which is why it's not my favorite play because I don't know how to deal with the disappointment at the end without having a sequel ready to pick up.
Yeah.
So you've just finished your PhD. Are you planning to publish soon?
I well, I've almost finished my PhD. Almost.
Okay, you've
Um,
submitted your PhD.
yeah. But yes, the plan is definitely I would like to publish the novel, and I am working on a sequel. Um, because as you say, it is quite a disappointing ending. But I think for me that actually motivated me a bit more because I'm then imagining what happens afterwards and thinking, okay, well, if nobody else has written this, then I guess I'll have to do it.
That's the essence of fan fiction, isn't it? Trying to fill the gaps and find the happy ending. So, would you like to share anything about what you're planning to do with the sequel, or would you like to keep it a secret for now?
Um, well, I will say that there are two characters that do get together in my novel. Not any of the four boy band or not any of the boy band and the girls, they don't get together. But the band's manager, who is based on Don Armado,
Mm.
and one of the girls has a bodyguard because she's very famous. Her bodyguard, who is based on Boyette, they're a couple. And they are together at the end of Kings of Navarre. And the sequel, the thing that brings them all the characters back together will be their wedding.
I see. Yep.
So go back to the setting where they've been for their retreat because obviously that's where the Boyette character and the Don Armado character met. So that's where they want to get married at this beautiful hotel.
Mhm.
And that's what brings everyone back together. And I'm not going to have all the couples get together at the same time. I'm going to have one that's together from the beginning, one that gets together in the middle, and one that gets together right at the end.
Oh, that's
And one that doesn't get together at all.
yeah.
That's
That
my
sounds
plan.
interesting. Sounds interesting. I'd definitely read that just for the second part of it. So,
Yeah.
are you interested in adapting any other plays?
Oh yes, I've got ideas. I did NaNoWriMo last year. Was it last year or the year before?
Hmm.
One of them. And I did The Merry Wives of Windsor, but I set it at the summer camp that I worked at in America. Um, so that's another one that is needs a bit of tweaking, but the bulk of that is done and that could be ready to go as well.
Okay.
I mean, that's more ready to go than my sequel to Kings of Navarre, but yeah, so that's The Merry Wives of Windsor. I have a vague spark of an idea of like a Oberon and Titania origin story set before A Midsummer Night's Dream, but also covering the events of A Midsummer Night's Dream, because some of the fan fictions of Shakespeare that I've read are prequels or prequels that then cover the events of. So there's a market for that as well.
Do you think there's a market for Shakespeare fan fiction outside of Shakespeare geeks?
Oh, I think so. A lot of these that I've got them all on a bookshelf next to me, so I'm looking at in my peripheral. Um, I would have enjoyed without knowing anything about the play. Like there's some that I've read that are fan fiction of plays that I'm less familiar with. Um, I would say the ones that I'm most familiar with are like Love's Labour's Lost, obviously, and then Macbeth and Much Ado About Nothing, because they're the ones that I've like studied in depth.
Mm.
Um, but then I've read fan fictions of The Tempest, for example, which I'm not as familiar with, and really enjoyed them just for what they are because they're well written and they're enjoyable to read.
Mm.
There's some that are also like more loosely based on the Shakespeare. Like the connections are a bit more tenuous, perhaps, but they're still just enjoyable reads, and I think that's the key thing.
Mm. Do you feel so? Recently, of course, there's been more of a push for people to watch Shakespeare to understand, because a lot of people get bogged down by the language, or they look at Shakespeare as something difficult or complicated. So more teachers are promoting watching Shakespeare either through film or through going to the theatre. What do you think are the advantages of reading Shakespeare as a novel? Do you think it makes the characters more accessible or the plot more accessible for newer generations of Shakespeare learners?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because one of the great things that a novel has that a play perhaps doesn't is more exploration of the inner thoughts and the motivations of each character.
Mm.
And I feel like the more you explore that, the more you understand what's going on,
Yeah.
basically.
Mm. Fair enough. And so do you have any suggestions for people who might want to get into Shakespeare through novels because they find maybe the plays too challenging or the films too challenging?
My favourite one, I think, has been Foul is Fair by Hannah Capin, which is a Macbeth fan fiction, but it really focuses on the character of Lady Macbeth. It's like Heathers meets Gossip Girl. It's brutal, it's violent, it's very feminist, and it's just so well written. Her motivations and the way the character is explored is really, really good. Um, I also very much enjoyed Twelfth Night, Night with a K, which is an adaptation of Twelfth Night, obviously, but set on a online role playing game. So the gender swapping that happens. That's their Viola's online character,
Hmm.
which is a very modern adaptation. It's very clever how that's handled and how the online world and the offline world then collide um, in order to bring that to a resolution. I love Nothing Happened by Molly Booth because it's much ado about nothing, but it's set at a summer camp. And that's just a personal favourite for me because I've worked at summer camps. So anything set in a summer camp is an automatic read for me. Um, and then there's Under a Dancing Star, which is also Much Ado About Nothing, but it's like a prequel.
Hmm.
Because in Much Ado About Nothing, Beatrice says, I know you of old. And that one line has sparked so much fan fiction because it gives hints at a backstory that we don't know about. And we think, oh, what happened between them before? Which I just love. Chloe Gong's done some great adaptations, These Violent Delights and Our Violent Ends. I haven't read the Immortal Longings one yet, but I really want to because I really enjoyed the other ones. Stormwake by Lucy Christopher, that's The Tempest. But it's so like lyrical the way she's written it. It's just really soothing and enjoyable to read. There's a real rhythm to the writing. It's yeah, honestly, one of the best things about my entire PhD project is being able to read all of these books.
Hmm. Would you say that some of the challenge for people like yourself who are adapting Shakespeare, would you say it's adapting the plot to modern times or making it more accessible to people? Or would you say it's exploring questions of identity? Because there's been a lot of people working with queer characters, and as you mentioned, feminist tropes have become quite popular. So do you think that's what brings writers like yourself to Shakespeare?
Um, that's a really interesting question, actually, because so the way I've sort of conceptualized the relationship between Shakespeare and fan fiction in my thesis is as a sort of symbiosis. I've used the biological terms of like mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism for in order to explore this relationship. And I want to create a fan fiction that has that relationship of mutualism whereby the original benefits and the fan fiction benefits. So yes, adapting it to a modern setting while still being faithful to the original. Yes, including the representation that perhaps isn't there or isn't as obvious in the originals, because that is it's I've got a whole chapter about inclusivity in my thesis, to talk about including like Black and minority ethnic characters and LGBTQIA plus characters, in a way that makes sense, so that it doesn't just seem like you're shoehorning it in there because of representation and you're trying to tick a box.
Yeah.
But with Love's Labour's Lost, there are characters that could be seen as more ethnically diverse, because Rosaline is described as beauteous as ink and things like that. In other plays, there are characters. I mean, like the relationship between Antonio and Sebastian in Twelfth Night. Are you telling me that's 100% straight? Because I don't think so. um, so it's not about just shoehorning it in. It's about drawing on what's already there and just sort of teasing it out a bit more in a way that works for the modern setting, which is why I've chosen a modern setting, because I have more freedom
Mm.
to use that kind of storyline.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Elizabeth. That was fascinating, and I'm very much looking forward to your book, both first part and second part. So I
Yeah,
hope the second part comes as well. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So there you have it. That was Elizabeth Wright discussing her adaptation of Love's Labour's Lost, one of the lesser known plays of Shakespeare, and often one of the more intimidating ones to adapt because of its problematic ending. So that's it for today's episode. If you'd like to tell me what you thought about it, make sure to reach out on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Substack and Facebook, as well as Instagram and TikTok. And you can always email me at shakespop@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed listening to us as much as we enjoyed talking to you.